Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel for the next installment in our new figure showcase series, where we take a look at the latest 6-scale release being added into my collection. And today's episode will focus on the Amazing Spider-Man, or the Andrew Garfield variant from Spider-Man No Way Home. And look, while the box identifies this figure as part of the Amazing Spider-Man 2 line, it's really from No Way Home. There's just no doubt about that. Now, if you did watch my Lizard diorama review, some of these talking points might be repeats, so apologies in advance. But I'll start by saying for some reason, I'm guessing all related to cost, Hot Toys wasn't able to package this version of Spidey as part of their No Way Home line of figures. And that's why we ended up getting the separate releases for the figure and the base, which differ pretty substantially from what we're getting with the integrated suit Tom Holland and the upcoming Tobey Maguire Spidey that all came in a deluxe option where you could get the figure and the base all in one set. But look, the key is Hot Toys found a way to get us an updated Andrew Garfield, and regardless of how they did that, I'm not going to complain. And as a little apology, I thought the figure was going to ship a little bit later, and I did jump the gun on reviewing the base earlier. If I had gotten both, I would have done a joint review. So even though I am going to showcase the base again, I'm not going to go too in-depth into it just because I covered that pretty extensively previously. So the primary focus here is going to be on the figure, but I did take some shots just to show you how massive the box was for the Lizard base when compared with the box for the figure. And along with the integrated suit box, which was pretty sizable, I think we can expect that the next two Spidey releases in the line are going to be pretty comparable in size. And final note before jumping into the piece itself, this is actually the third iteration of this Andrew Garfield Spidey that Hot Toys has made from the Amazing Spider-Man series of movies. I passed on those previous versions, can't actually remember why since I did like those movies, but I did, so I really don't have anything in hand to compare this figure against. So this will be a review for the figure on its own merits without being biased by any of the previous releases. Okay, so let's look at our Amazing Spider-Man release along with all the accessories included. And for the figure itself, I will say he's a pretty straightforward release with everything we would expect from a Spider-Man figure, including a massive number of hands, your web pieces, a display stand, and most importantly, an Andrew Garfield alternate sculpt. So again, fairly straightforward release, but I think almost everything you would need for this character is provided here. And again, if you did get the diorama base, you did get that extra cure accessory, which also helps add a little something extra to the figure that might be missing here. So let's look more closely at these accessories, and we'll start with the hands. And again, just sheer quantity here is overwhelming, with hands ranging from pre-posed gesturing pieces with your peace sign, a pointing finger, and your web shooting hands, to fists, hands to grab the web elements, and so on. So clearly there's an intent here for you to really customize Spidey to display him in any way you see fit. I will say this though, the hands are molded plastic, and while they look good in their own right, I do feel like once they're on the figure there is an appreciable difference between the fabric of the suit and the molded pieces. Not to take away from the work that's been done here, because if you look closely, the raised molded webbing looks great, and while it's difficult to see, the red isn't just solid red paint. There's a subtle ghosting of web-like patterns under the red paint that does add a little something extra to the pieces. So overall, I'm pretty impressed with these, although there are some slight negatives, but nothing that I would consider an overall deal breaker. Next, you actually get his mask, which is meant to be held by him when he's equipped with the unmasked sculpt, and it's done well. It's not the first time we've seen this accessory. We've seen it released a number of times with the Tom Holland Spideys, but here what sets the Andrew version apart has to be the eyes with the larger lenses. Now, I know that some people have already noted that the lenses aren't totally accurate to the movie. I honestly haven't watched No Way Home in a while, so I can't really comment on that, but I think it's a solid piece overall. Next, you do get those web pieces, and look, if you own any other Spider-Man figures, these are all going to be instantly recognizable to you. They're all reused pieces, and they're now the standard webs that we've been getting with every Spider-Man figure for years. I was happy to see some of the newer pre-orders finally showing some different webs, just because while these look good, it's just time to get something a little bit different. But again, doesn't detract from the fact that these look good. The open web end looks great, and then you get the clear plastic that's used for these that does have some shimmer effect to it, kind of recreating what we saw on screen. Plus, there's a nice variety of short pieces, long pieces, and some more dynamic elements to really help you pose Spidey up. Only thing that's typical with all of these, that fully unfurled web that's open is pretty heavy, and I always find that once it's added to the longer web strands, the weight just pulls it down and the entire thing just doesn't pose well. And final accessory is the stand. Now, if you don't get the diorama base, you can still use this to achieve some nice dynamic poses with your figure, courtesy of the posable flight stand, but you will have the base that identifies this as part of the Amazing Spider-Man 2 line. It's good to have, but for me, having that lizard diorama piece, there's no way I'm not using that for the display ultimately. Okay, so let's jump into the sculpts, and we'll look at both the masked and unmasked versions. So first up, the masked version, and I think the key here is that each version of Spidey is slightly different, be it the suit, the Spidey symbol on the chest, or the mask. And for Andrew Garfield, the lenses on the mask were always a huge standout with the very large size, definitely larger than the Tobey and the Tom Holland versions. Now, I mentioned it earlier, but I did see some comments regarding the inaccuracy of the lenses. Frankly, I think they still look great, and I like the dot matrix pattern on the interior with the grayish lenses. The web is done really well with nothing bunching up, and there is a nice texture to the red fabric elements that works. So overall, I think it's a pretty accurate sculpt. Maybe not 100%, but it's pretty solid. Now, next up is the unmasked Andrew Garfield portrait. I think it's really good as well, and I want to note that with the light on and hitting the sculpt straight on, some of the really great detail work is washed out, which is a shame because there's actually a fair amount of detailing that's going on here with wrinkles, plus you get the eyes and the hair, so it's overall well done. Now, do I think it looks like Andrew Garfield? Yes, I think the likeness is undeniable. Do I think it's accurate to No Way Home? Not really. I think he looks a little bit too young. Not that Andrew Garfield looks that old, but in the movie he was definitely older than the previous films, and his hair was much more disheveled. Here you're getting a very clean-cut looking sculpt, and again, I think it's just too young. Maybe more accurate to the Amazing Spider-Man 2, and that might be license related, so I'm not going to entirely hold it against Hot Toys, but it was one of the first things that stood out. Now, the rest of the figure is really solid, and I'm choosing my words carefully because while I like the figure a lot, it's definitely not one of the best Spider-Man figures I've gotten in hand. It's actually not even close. But the suit looks really good. It has a distinctive longer leg Spidey logo on the chest and back. The red fabric looks fantastic too, with the raised black webbing running along the chest and the arms. And again, if you look closely, there is a web pattern that's ghosted into the fabric that does give the suit a little more detail. The blue sections of the suit are a more rubbery material with a bit of a textured pattern as well, and it almost looks slightly metallic with some subtle line work that runs down his legs towards the boots. That again, just like the mask and the other red fabric elements, are detailed really well with that raised webbing. So why did I say he's not my favorite Spidey? There are actually a lot of little reasons. Some I've already touched on. For starters, the hands. While the variety is impressive, the fact that they went with molded plastic just means that there's definitely an obvious contrast between the hand and the forearm. It's something I hadn't noticed with the Tom Holland versions of the character, but then again, his gloves also have some black elements on the back of the hand that kind of allow you to transition to the fingers. So it's maybe less obvious that there's this difference. So this is definitely just a nitpick on my side, and it's clearly more based on the suit design. But again, just something I found a tad annoying. The other issues though are much more significant, and they're all basically come down to posability. So the first big issue for me, the sculpts, both masked and unmasked. They basically come socketed onto the neck, and in turn, the neck piece actually clips onto the body. I think it's a smart way to allow us to swap out the heads, but the articulation is a little limited. You can definitely get the head to swivel to the sides, but you get very limited upward and downward articulation. And because of the way the neck pegs into the body, your neck is kind of stuck in this slightly forward-leaning position. So it definitely hurts a little bit during posing. And to go along with that, the feet. Be very careful. With some of the other Spideys, I was able to really push the foot articulation. Here you can get some decent range, but if you try to push the feet a little too far, you will pull them off the socket. It happened to me a little bit, but fortunately I was able to get them locked back in easily, but it did give me a momentary bout of panic. Here's the thing though, by itself it's a decent release. Not something that's going to blow your mind, but that changes 100% once you add in the diorama base. Combined, the two pieces really come to life. I've been collecting for a while now, so sometimes it's hard to be impressed by some of these figures, as good as they are. But just like with the integrated suit, once I posed Spidey up with the lizard base, I just had to step back and take it all in. That's how impressed I was. First of all, the sheer scale of the combined piece is pretty insane. It takes up a ton of real estate, but it is a standout piece, and with the dynamically posed lizard, it really makes you feel like you're seeing an action sequence unfold right before your eyes. For me, this is without a doubt the way I have to display the figure. Without the base, it's okay, but together, again, it's impressive, and it just really grabs your attention. I do know these take up a ton of space, and once the Toby Spidey is released, all three are going to basically be one massive display. If you do have limited display space and don't care about the dioramas, I think the figure is a solid pickup. I would say again, it's not the best Spider-Man by Hot Toys currently on the market. It's really good, but there are some things holding it back. But if you just want the 3 Spideys on display, I don't think you'll be disappointed. But if you can accommodate the diorama pieces, anyone who comes in to see your collection is going to be blown away. For me, one question is, how am I ultimately going to display these? Again, these are getting boxed back up until I can get my modifications in and up, but part of me would love to show the Spideys with their masks on. But I think one of the distinctive appeals here is to actually see the sculpts and realize you have all 3 versions of Spider-Man on display. While I think the Andrew Garfield is a little too young, it's still an awesome sculpt that I would be okay displaying, but I have some time to ponder that, which is a positive. For now, again, I'll say, with the diorama, this is one of the most stunning sets I've seen in a while. So, that was a quick look at the Amazing Spider-Man from Hot Toys in 6-scale figure format. And we still have the Toby version to come, and as well as the final scene Tom Holland figure, and all the villains, so there's still a long way to go on this line. Now, let me know your thoughts, and as always, thank you for watching, and if you are enjoying the content, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, and we'll touch base on the next video.